55 years ago this August, Richard Nixon sat down in the Oval Office, went on national television, and killed the gold standard. One sentence, one broadcast. Everything changed. Gold was $35 an ounce that day. Today, it's around $4,500. But I'm not here to talk about gold going up. I'm here to talk about the dollar going down. 99.2% down, measured in ounces. And I'm here to tell you who planned it. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly why the gold price is the only honest audit the dollar ever had, and what the 99.2% number is actually measuring. You'll know who Volcker worked for before he walked into the Treasury building, and why the chain of custody matters for how you read this market today. You'll know what Treasury Secretary Bessent is doing right now, in August of 2026, that tells you this isn't history, it's a live signal. If you don't understand what happened on August 15th, 1971, and who made it happen, you're going to keep misreading gold. You'll treat it as a commodity trade when it's actually a verdict, a 55-year verdict that gets reconfirmed in the market every single day. That verdict right now sits at $44.95. Let's figure out how it got there. Let's start with the number, because the number is the whole story. August 15th, 1971, Nixon suspends the convertibility of dollars to gold. And just like that, the anchor's gone. Gold that day, $35 an ounce. Today, 55 years later, gold is $44.95 an ounce. That's more than 128 times the price. Don't think of that as gold going up. Think of it as the dollar going down. The ounce didn't change. 1 ounce of gold is still 1 ounce of gold. What changed is how many dollars it takes to buy one. The dollar lost 99.2% of its purchasing power, measured against gold. That number, $44.95, is an audit, the only honest one the dollar has ever had. You can't silence the gold market. It runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every dollar printed since 1971 shows up in that number. Every bailout, every QE program, every emergency facility. The market does the math even when the government won't. 99.2% gone in 55 years. That doesn't happen by accident. Somebody made a decision. So the question is, who? Nixon signed the order. That's history. Every textbook says so. But somebody planned it, worked the policy architecture, identified the mechanism, and set the date. We know who, because he told us. Paul Volcker. You know that name. The financial world built a shrine to him for breaking inflation in the 1980s. He raised rates, crushed price growth, saved the dollar, a hero in central banking circles. But here's what gets left out. From 1965 to 1969, Volcker worked for David Rockefeller at Chase Manhattan Bank. 4 years at Rockefeller's bank, then he leaves, goes into the Treasury Department as Undersecretary for Monetary Affairs, and inside of 3 years, August 15th, 1971, the gold window closes. And about that role, Volcker's own words, "I certainly was a major proponent of suspending gold convertibility. In fact, the principal planner." Not my interpretation, not a theory. He said it. Principal planner. Here's what that chain of custody means for you. The man who designed the removal of gold from the monetary system came directly from the private banking world, from David Rockefeller's bank specifically. And within 3 years of leaving it, he executed the single most important monetary policy decision of the 20th century. The record names every link. You can trace every step. The Rockefeller connection has a paper trail. But here's the next question. After they removed the anchor, what happened to the gold itself? Is it still there? The United States government says it holds gold. Fort Knox, the Denver Mint, West Point. The official position, it's there. It's always been there. It's not going anywhere. Here's the problem. There has never been a complete, independent, publicly verified audit of America's gold. Not once. Not ever. The 1953 audit everybody cites? That was a spot check. Roughly 6% of the holding. After that, Treasury ran its own continuing audit program. Treasury auditing Treasury. That program wrapped up in 1986, and 7 of its reports can't be produced at all. 1986, 40 years ago. Every public company in America has to open its books every year. Independent auditors verify the assets. That's not optional. That's the law. The U.S. government, holding the world's largest reported gold reserve, has never once let an outside auditor count the whole thing. Maybe that's just how government works, or maybe there's a reason. In 1974, 3 years after the gold window closed, Louise Boyer was Nelson Rockefeller's executive assistant. A tabloid, the National Tatler, ran a story sourced to her. U.S. gold had been quietly moved out of the vaults, through the New York Fed, and on to Europe. 2 days after that story ran, she fell from the 10th floor window of her Manhattan apartment, July 3, 1974. Her body was found the next morning, on Independence Day. A tabloid made the claim, but it moved Congress enough that 2 months later, Treasury and Congress's own auditors opened only one of the 15 vault compartments for cameras. Nobody has counted the rest since. I'm not here to tell you what happened to Louise Boyer. I can't. And I'm not here to tell you what's in Fort Knox. I can't do that either, because nobody has checked. That's the whole point. What I can tell you is this. Gold is at $44.95 an ounce. No outside auditor has ever verified that holding. And the man who closed the gold window came from the family whose assistant sourced the story that it was already gone. That isn't bureaucratic delay. It's policy. And the gold price keeps running its own audit every day the vaults stay closed. That was 1974. This is 2026. And something is happening right now that tells you this isn't ancient history. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is running a campaign his own department named Economic Fury. Last week, he promised economic isolation like the world has never seen. And the targets aren't just oil. They're yuan-denominated payments and what officials call alternative payment methods. A lot of analysts could read that as dollar strength, reserve currency asserting dominance. Sounds reassuring. But think about what that actually is. He's spending diplomatic capital fighting payment rails built outside the dollar. And those rails are real. BRICS-Pay, a direct alternative to SWIFT, goes to full deployment at the BRICS Summit next month. You don't fight a threat that doesn't exist. And here's the number. End of 2025, the dollar was 56.8% of global reserves. At the turn of the millennium, it was over 70. That's the IMF's measurement, not mine. Dominant reserve currencies don't need active suppression. That posture is dollar fragility, not dollar strength. Here's the signal. When a Treasury Secretary spends political capital countering alternatives to the dollar, you're watching a system defend itself, not from strength, but from pressure. That's the Bessent confirmation signal. August 15, 1971 isn't a historical footnote. It's the origin story of a problem producing visible symptoms. Nixon made the call. Volcker planned it. The Rockefeller connection has a paper trail. The vaults have never had a full independent count. Senator Rand Paul walked in this month and said the gold bars are there. Bessent said the same. But neither of them counted it bar by bar. And today, Treasury is fighting the alternatives, which means the alternatives are real. Gold at $44.95 is the market's ongoing measurement. If the system keeps doing what it's done, and Bessent's posture says it will, prepare for higher precious metals prices, not as a prediction, as a continuation of the trend. The Fort Knox question stays open. It has never once been closed. And every day it stays open, the gold market keeps running the only audit anybody's actually doing. $44.95 and counting. You now know the bar. You know the dollar lost 99.2% of its purchasing power against gold since 1971, and why that number is the only honest audit the dollar has ever had. You know Volcker named himself the principal planner, and you know who he worked for before he walked into the Treasury building. You know Bessent's posture in 2026 isn't dollar strength. It's the confirmation signal that the alternatives are gaining ground. But knowing the story isn't the same as knowing the trade. You just watched 55 years of dollar debasement confirmed in gold price, and you know who designed it. The question you should be asking right now is, does gold keep running from here? And if so, when do you enter? And where does the trend fail? That's the price question, not a narrative question. And a narrative, even a true one, can't answer it. Here's what understanding that story doesn't give you. The truth about price. It gives you a narrative, and narratives matter. But price is what tells you whether the narrative is true or not. The measured move is a framework for knowing the direction of price. It tells you whether this narrative is being confirmed by price or not. If you act on a story like this without that framework, you could be right about everything that you just heard and still be on the wrong side of a trade for days, weeks, or even months. That framework is what I teach. The traders in my community don't get trapped by narratives. They know where a trend fails, and until it does, until price confirms it, they will trade a bullish trend until it fails, even if it is against a bearish narrative. They have a framework for reading it themselves. That process is what I teach every day at eMiniaddict.com.